This woman filed a complaint against the man who literally saved her life. His crime? Performing the Heimlich maneuver when she was choking on her lunch. What happened next destroyed her career, her friendships, and left her questioning everything she thought she knew about right and wrong. I'm Emma, and welcome to Mrs. Emma, where I share real stories about real people facing impossible choices. What you're about to hear might make you uncomfortable. It might make you angry. But I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes doing what feels right can lead to the worst possible outcome. Her name is Paisley, 29 years old, working a standard office job that covered her bills and kept her afloat. Nothing glamorous, just customer service and paperwork on the third floor of a mid-sized company. She'd been there about a year when this all started to unravel. There was a colleague named Donovan. He'd been with the company longer. Worked in a different section but on the same floor. Everyone loved him. You know the type. Always cheerful, remembered birthdays, held elevator doors, asked genuine questions about your weekend, and actually listened to the answers. Paisley thought they'd developed a real friendship. Lunch together sometimes, easy conversation by the coffee station. The kind of work relationship that makes 8 hours a day feel less like a prison sentence. She'd even wondered occasionally if he might be interested in something more, but she'd kept things strictly professional. Dating coworkers was messy, and she needed this job. But something started bothering her. Small things at first. The way he'd lean in just a little too close during conversations. How his hand would linger on her shoulder when making a point. Those moments when she'd look up from her desk and catch him watching her from across the room with an intensity that felt off. She told herself she was overreacting. He was the nicest guy in the office. Everyone adored him. If she suddenly became cold or distant, people would think she'd lost her mind. So she pushed down that uncomfortable feeling and kept smiling, kept being friendly back, kept pretending everything was fine. Paisley started doing small things to create distance without being obvious about it. She'd mention other men she was talking to, trying to signal she wasn't interested romantically. She'd make sure other people joined their lunch conversations, keeping things from getting too personal. But Donovan never seemed to notice these hints, or maybe he just ignored them. Looking back, she realizes now that she was already feeling trapped between her instincts telling her something was wrong and her rational mind saying she was imagining problems that didn't exist. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Lunch break in the small office kitchen area, nothing fancy, just tables and a microwave, and a group of coworkers who ate together to save money. Paisley sat down with her homemade turkey sandwich, chatting with Donovan and 3 other colleagues. Then she took a bite that was too large. It lodged in her throat completely, cutting off her airway. She tried to cough, but nothing happened. No air moving in or out. Pure panic flooded through her body as she grabbed at her throat, making desperate choking sounds. Everyone froze. For what felt like an eternity but was probably only seconds, nobody moved. Then Donovan jumped up, rushed behind her chair, and announced he knew the Heimlich maneuver from some first aid training he'd completed. His arms wrapped around her from behind, his chest pressed against her back. And in that terrifying moment when she literally couldn't breathe, when fear was overwhelming every other thought, Paisley felt something that made her freeze inside. The intimacy of the position, the feeling of his entire body against hers, the pressure of not just his arms but everything pressed against her while the whole table watched. The maneuver worked. The food dislodged and flew across the table. Air rushed back into her lungs. Everyone erupted in cheers and applause, calling Donovan a hero, celebrating the fact that she was alive and breathing. But Paisley felt wrong. Violated somehow, even though her rational brain screamed that he'd just saved her life. She couldn't process the mix of gratitude and discomfort warring inside her chest. Without saying anything to anyone, she stood up and walked straight to the bathroom, needing space to understand what she was feeling. Locked in the bathroom stall, Paisley's hands shook as she tried to calm her racing heart. Yes, he'd saved her life. Yes, everyone saw it happen. Yes, she should feel nothing but grateful. But she couldn't shake the memory of how intimate it felt, how long it seemed to last, how aware she was of his body against hers while everyone watched and cheered. She stayed hidden for 10 minutes, trying to sort through the confusion. When she finally emerged, Donovan immediately approached, asking repeatedly if she was okay, if she needed water, if she wanted to talk. His concern should have felt caring, but instead, it felt suffocating. That evening at home, Paisley called her sister, desperately needing to talk through what she was feeling. As she described the incident, her sister's reaction changed everything. Her sister suggested that maybe Donovan had taken advantage of the situation somehow. Maybe a trained professional would have handled it differently. Maybe he'd held on longer than medically necessary. Suddenly, all of Paisley's doubts seemed validated. Her sister said that saving someone's life didn't give anyone the right to make them feel uncomfortable, and that her feelings were legitimate regardless of his intentions. Paisley barely slept that night, replaying everything over and over to figure out if she was crazy or if her instincts were trying to protect her from something real. The next morning, seeing Donovan felt different. He kept trying to check on her, asking how she was feeling, but now it felt like he was trying to create some special bond between them because of what happened. During the morning break, he cornered her by the coffee machine, speaking in a low, intimate voice about the incident. That's when Paisley decided she had to act. If she didn't speak up about her discomfort, he might think she was okay with everything, or worse, that she wanted more contact like that. She needed to protect herself and create a record in case anything else happened in the future. That afternoon, she walked into the Human Resources office, her stomach churning with anxiety. She explained to the HR representative that during the choking incident, Donovan had been inappropriately close, that she'd felt his private areas against her body in a way that made her deeply uncomfortable and violated. She described their previous interactions, how he'd lean too close, touch her shoulder unnecessarily, stare at her from across the office. Laid out like that, it did sound like a pattern building toward something more serious. The HR representative took detailed notes and explained they'd need to conduct a full investigation, interviewing witnesses and getting Donovan's side. Paisley asked for confidentiality, but the representative said they had to follow standard procedures. Walking out of that office, Paisley felt simultaneously empowered for standing up for herself and sick to her stomach, knowing what was coming next. Word spread fast. Despite supposed confidentiality, everyone knew within days that there was an HR investigation involving Paisley and Donovan. The whispers started immediately, the stares in the hallway, the conversations that stopped when she approached. She'd see Donovan in the break room or elevator, and the confusion and hurt on his face was undeniable. Part of her felt terrible for causing him pain when he'd saved her life, but her sister kept reinforcing that she'd done the right thing, that men like him count on women feeling too guilty to speak up. HR interviewed everyone who'd been at lunch that day. Paisley could read their faces when they returned. They all thought she was being ridiculous. One coworker, Jessica, literally rolled eyes at her. Paisley overheard her in the bathroom later, telling someone that she was making a huge deal out of nothing, that Donovan was just trying to save her life like any decent person would. The office turned cold. People who used to include her in lunch plans started keeping their distance. Conversations died when she joined a group. Even her work friends became awkward and distant, as if afraid she might report them next for saying the wrong thing. Meanwhile, Donovan became a martyr in everyone's eyes. People talked about how unfair the investigation was, how terrible it was that good deeds got punished, how he was such a gentleman being persecuted for helping someone. Nobody tried to understand Paisley's perspective or acknowledge that her feelings might be valid. They only saw the surface. Man saves woman, woman reports man. The context, the history, her discomfort, none of it mattered to anyone. After a week of investigation and interviews, HR called Paisley back in. Their conclusion was predictable. They found no evidence of intentional, inappropriate behavior on Donovan's part. They'd have a conversation with him about workplace boundaries and appropriate contact, but that was all. Then came the suggestion that made Paisley's blood boil. Maybe she should consider requesting a transfer to a different floor if she felt uncomfortable continuing to work near him every day. She couldn't believe it. She was supposed to be the victim, but she was the one being told to move, to change her work situation, to uproot herself. It was clear they just wanted the whole incident to disappear quietly without any more drama or liability. After the investigation ended with essentially no consequences, things got exponentially worse. Donovan went from friendly and chatty to treating Paisley like she didn't exist. Not just distant or awkward, completely invisible. If she entered the break room while he was there, he'd immediately leave without acknowledging her presence. In the elevator together, he'd stare at his phone or the floor as if she weren't standing right next to him. When she tried basic greetings like good morning, he'd give her a blank, cold stare and either not respond or nod slightly before walking away as quickly as possible. It hurt more than when he'd been too friendly. At least then, he'd treated her like a human being deserving basic respect. Now she felt like a ghost wandering through the office that nobody could see or hear. Worse, everyone else followed his lead. Since Donovan was so beloved and everyone thought she'd wronged him, they adopted the same cold treatment. Lunch invitations stopped. Conversations ended when she approached. Weekend plans and birthday parties happened without her. The isolation was crushing. Paisley found herself constantly analyzing everything, questioning whether she'd misinterpreted Donovan's actions, turned something innocent into something sinister in her own mind. Maybe he really was just trying to save her life in the most effective way possible, and she'd twisted it into something sexual that it never was. The doubt ate at her daily, especially sitting alone at lunch watching him laugh and joke with everyone else like nothing had ever happened between them. After weeks of hostile treatment and social isolation, Paisley decided she couldn't take it anymore. She needed to talk directly to Donovan to try clearing the air, even if it meant admitting she might have handled everything wrong. She waited until most people had left for the day and approached him at his desk as he was packing up to go home. She said she wanted to talk about what happened and find a way to move forward professionally. His expression when he looked at her was completely different from any way he'd ever looked at her before. Not angry exactly, but cold and distant and final in a way that made her realize he wasn't the same person anymore. He told her very calmly that he understood she did what she felt was right, but that he also had to protect himself now. After being accused of inappropriate behavior for literally saving someone's life, he couldn't risk having any kind of personal relationship with her ever again, because he never knew when she might decide something else he did was wrong. The finality in his voice made it clear he'd already written her off completely as a person, and nothing she could say would change his mind or repair the damage. Paisley tried to explain that she never meant for things to go so far, that she was confused and scared, that maybe she overreacted. But he cut her off. The damage to his reputation was done, he said. From now on, he'd only interact with her when absolutely necessary for work, and even then with witnesses present so there couldn't be any misunderstandings. Then came the words that really stung. He told her he'd learned a valuable lesson about being careful who you try to help. Next time someone was in trouble or danger, he'd think twice before getting involved, because you never know how people might twist your good intentions. The way he said it made Paisley feel like she hadn't just ruined their friendship and her work relationships, but potentially put other people at risk because now he'd hesitate to help anyone in an emergency. Walking back to her desk, Paisley realized everything had completely backfired. Instead of protecting herself and setting boundaries, she'd ended up more isolated and uncomfortable than ever before. She'd lost the one person at work who seemed to care about her. She'd made enemies out of people who used to be friendly. She'd created a toxic environment where everyone saw her as the villain. And worst of all, she wasn't even sure anymore that she'd been right to report him in the first place. Over the following months, nothing improved. Donovan kept his word about only professional interaction, sending emails instead of talking face-to-face whenever possible. Coworkers continued freezing her out. Eventually, Paisley started eating lunch alone in her car just to avoid the awkward tension and hostile looks in the cafeteria. She applied for transfers to other departments, but somehow word about the HR incident had spread throughout the entire building. Nobody wanted the drama and potential liability of having her on their team. Finally, Paisley realized she had to start looking for a completely new job. The work environment had become so hostile that she dreaded coming in every single day. And here's the part that really hurt. She found out through office gossip that Donovan had been promoted to a supervisor position. Everyone was talking about how well-deserved it was because he was such a stand-up guy who always looked out for his coworkers and did the right thing. Meanwhile, Paisley was stuck trying to explain to potential employers why she was leaving her current job after such a short time, trying to figure out how to tell the story without sounding like a problem employee who causes drama everywhere she goes. Looking back now, Paisley still doesn't know if she was right or wrong about the whole situation, but she definitely knows that speaking up and reporting Donovan cost her far more than staying quiet and dealing with her discomfort would have. Sometimes she wonders what would have happened if she'd just said thank you for saving my life and moved on, instead of making it into something that ended up hurting everyone involved, including herself most of all. This story raises questions that don't have easy answers. When do we trust our instincts about feeling uncomfortable, even when our rational mind says we're overreacting? How do we balance protecting ourselves with recognizing genuine kindness? Where's the line between standing up for ourselves and destroying someone's reputation over a misunderstanding? I don't have the answers. Maybe you don't either. But Paisley's story is a reminder that sometimes the choices we make to protect ourselves can create consequences we never anticipated. Sometimes doing what feels right in the moment can lead us down a path we never wanted to walk. Her career was damaged. Her reputation was destroyed. Her work relationships were shattered. And she's still not sure if it was worth it, or if she made the biggest mistake of her professional life by speaking up about something that maybe, just maybe, was exactly what it appeared to be. A man saving a woman's life. Nothing more and nothing less. Thank you for listening to this story here on Mrs. Emma. If this story made you think, if it stirred something inside you, please hit that like button. Share this video with friends who might need to hear it. And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of these real-life stories about impossible choices and difficult situations. I'm Emma, and I'll see you in the next story.